So it's really a waste of money. Ask about types of paper. It's a waste of money if you change it at that stage. Ask about types of paper. Colour printing was originally designed to go onto gloss paper. They also had matte paper because it made it easier to read. Designers, love them to bits, decided that they were going to have silk because they didn't want it too matte or too gloss, they wanted something in the middle. So we came up with silk paper, or the paper manufacturers did. Current trends are to print on uncoated papers, very often recycles, but not always, for this sort of green feel. It's worth remembering that technically matte, silk and uncoated papers should run a sealer on them. So matte, silk and uncoated papers are more expensive to use. Not necessarily because they're more expensive papers, but you should have a sealer on them because they rub, especially silks. When you get to the stage of ordering your print, make sure that you've got everything nailed down. Printers are, I mean, we try not to, but we do tend to get wrapped up in our own little technical world, and you know, we have things like, if you look at the terminology, we have things like BPOP, and people go, yeah, that's fine. BPOP very often means it's not boxed, it's strapped, it's on a pallet, and you get a huge great pallet full of brochures, and you go, oh my God, how are we going to store these? So check everything, and if you're not sure about anything, just ask. It's not a problem. It's not a, you know, it's not a black art anymore, not like it used to be. That's website designers do that. No, I'm only joking. They're lovely. Don't like computers. Right. I did touch on this earlier. If you're posting an item, it's very, very, very important to check that your postage weights work. Again, there's various bands, there's various companies, there's TNT, there's UK Post, but ultimately they all adhere very, very roughly to the same rules and regulations. The postman's got to stick it through somebody's door. And as I say, sizes, shapes, weights and things like that are critical. As a rule of thumb, I mean, there is a little calculation that's fairly easy to do, but as a rule of thumb, a 32-page brochure on 130-gram paper weighs 130 grams. If you want to get it under 100 grams, you need to go to probably 90 grams because you've got an envelope to put it in. So, you know, but ask your printer what it's going to weigh. Get him to provide you with a dummy so that you can feel it. You can actually weigh it yourself if you want to, and check, you know, the sizes that it's going to get into the certain postage band. I think the last thing that I've said there, work with a person and company, I should say, not necessarily just the person you feel you can trust. If somebody's giving you good advice, and it's not always the person that's going to be the cheapest, it's not always the person that's going to be, you know, I spoke to somebody once and they said, well, I said, why don't we try and sell the best product for the customer that fits on, that's the most economic to print? And I went through a number of reasons, and they said, well, why don't you just sell them what they ask for? I don't think that's proactive. I really don't think that's proactive. It's a working with design companies, it's a partnership. You work with the customer. I mean, the number of meetings that I've had with design companies and end users, and we've thrashed out what's the most effective way of, you know, printing, or what's the cheapest way, what's the most cost-effective way of printing this brochure? Oh, well, that's the most cost, it's not going to work. Okay, what's the next best? By and large, designers will design anything you want them to. If I said to somebody, a circular brochure is the cheapest way of doing it, a designer can design it, it's not a problem. You know, so many people say, I want a different size, I want a different shape, and that's going to do everything. It's not going to do everything. Some of the most effective printing I've seen has been very cost effective from a printing point of view, well designed, well printed, and it's done a great job. It doesn't have to be something that's, you know, massive or triangular. I remember Virgin did a triangular brochure once, and it cost them at least £50,000 to have it stapled together by hand, and I don't know whether it was any better than a good designed square one, personally. How are we doing for time? Okay. I do tend to ramble on. Oh, I'm doing all right. Right, going on to terminology. Again, this is, if you're not sure about it, just ask, as I said before. GSM is grams per square metre. Now it's not thickness of paper necessarily. So uncoated paper tends to be thicker than coated paper. Coated paper it's compressed, it's got a smoother surface, it's got a coating on it, china clay, and it does tend to make it thinner. There is 101,000 different grades of paper. It's as well to just start looking at it and seeing if it's going to do the job. I mean, there's a couple of tourist leaflets that I'm doing this year that are actually going on very, very low weight paper to form a booklet. And the reason for that is they can rack more, they can put more in the racks, the cost is a lot less, and it does the job equally well. You say, well, thin paper, you can read through it. Well, you can't if there's solid ink on both sides. And all the adverts in this particular publication have got solid ink both sides. So you don't get read-through, you only get show-through when you've got white paper with something black behind it. Again, that's down to the designer to a certain extent. But in this particular product, you know, we've saved a fortune and it's fulfilling all sorts of different needs. So paper, you know, do talk about it. Terminology again, 4-colour process, full colour, that's, you know, that's colour printing. All colour printing is done in CMYK, it's a standard universal colours, okay? And the various terminology the printers will put, they'll put 4x4 on quotes, well that means 4 colour both sides, and 4x nothing means one side, etc, etc. One thing that everybody seems to get wrong is printed pages, PP. When somebody quotes you on a 48 PP brochure, that is sides, not leaves. Printed pages, that's a printed page, that's another printed page, that's 2 printed pages, well it's actually 4, but yeah, so a double-sided A4 is a 2 PP A4, which might sound silly, but that's what printers will call it. PMS colours. When you have companies that have corporate identity, you know, like sort of oranges, gold, silvers, things like that, they can't very often be made absolutely exactly out of 4-colour process. Because to make all these lovely colours that you see on most brochures, they're a mixture of the CMYK, various percentages of them. But if somebody has, for instance, a Dayglow orange, you can't produce that out of process colours, so you have to put an extra colour on. I mean, I've got one at the moment that's 7 colours, which is, I think, slightly over the top, but there you go. That's what they wanted. Pantone colours, you've got loads to choose from. You've got a book, your designer will show you a book, and it's got, well, I don't know how many there are, probably about 500 or 600. Some of them you can match exactly from process, some you can't. Stitch trim, they will say, you know, and if it's a poor, I never think it's a very good estimate that says FST, which is fold stitch trim. Basically it's stapled and cutting to size, you know, a magazine, if you like. BPOP, I've mentioned that. Low res colour proof, that's for content only. High